Welcome back to Naval Action, and we're doing a bit of a ship review today. We're going to be having a look at the Santa Cecilia. The Santa Cecilia has got one of the best histories of all the ships, which is just as well because its stats are a bit crap, but we'll come to that. One of the best histories of all the ships in Naval Action. Now, she's a bit of an oddie because you can't make her at the moment, so she was out. The devs had her out for a day. A whole bunch of clever captains quickly ripped up a few copies of them, and then the next day they took her out, and we've not seen her again, so that's all a bit strange. Why would that happen? We don't know. Mystery. She's a fifth rate, and I guess the best way to describe her is a mid-tier fifth rate, so I don't know, maybe Master and Commander might be the first time you decide to jump aboard her. I'm going to spend a bit of time on her history, so if you're not into that sort of stuff, you might want to skip ahead 15 minutes or so. And then I'll do a comparison against all the other ships in the fifth rate division to show you where she stands. As a quick TLDR, she's kind of a bell pool on acid when it comes to gunnery, but a little bit weaker than the bell pool when it comes to cannons, which you can, if you're really good, you can miss with them all. So the Santa Cecilia, also known as the Hermione, or Hermione, who knows how you pronounce that, it's got an I in it, Hermione, so Hermione's going to do. So she was originally commissioned as the Hermione, she became the Santa Cecilia, and then she became Retribution, and then Retaliation. So any ship that's had 4 or 5 names has got a history to share, and we'll go over that now. So she was a British 32 gun 5th rate, again commissioned around the time of the Revolutionary War. Initially laid down in 1780. 2 years later she was launched, and then Admiral Lloyd, or Captain Lloyd, was her first captain. You'll have to excuse me, I'm sailing like a numpty at the moment. I'm trying to read 60 tons of notes while sailing. She was served in the West Indies, and her first real action of significance was around Port-au-Prince, where under a Captain Hills who'd taken hold of her by then, she was involved in escorting some troop ships into Port-au-Prince, and she subsequently captured, or they captured, Port-au-Prince. Captain Hills didn't fare too well, sadly, though. He died shortly after the action of Yellow Fever, so 07 Captain Hills. She would then be looked after by a Captain Wilkinson, but only for a very short period. I'm not being able to find out why he was decommissioned or lost his captaincy ever so quickly. At which time Captain Piggott, who later became quite infamous, took control of her. Now, under Captain Piggott, she had some successes. She was involved in capturing a number of smaller ships, schooners and privateers. But perhaps her most famous engagement was part of the fleet that went around Puerto Rico to what was known as the Battle of Jean Rebel. And this was a pretty stunning action. Her job was to sail at night to the port's entrance and be very, very sneaky. And then once into position, she opened up on enemy ships. Meanwhile, a whole bunch of launches with lots of sailors and marines on board secretly paddled into the harbour, and then managed to capture 9 ships and take their crews, but also, not also, but they cut them free and sailed them out, and the Brits ended up sinking 2 ships and sailing 9 without any significant loss. And this is around April 97, and that really gave the Brits dominance. And this was around, I think it was around Santo Domingo, I think, as we see it on the map today. And that really gave the Brits a strong footing. Now, for the next little while, she was just on duties, escorting ships, travelling around, intercepting ships under different flags and the likes. Now, Captain Piggott proved to be a harsh man, and that's been generous. Proved to be a harsh man, and he was known for giving out a lot of discipline, and he was known for being a little bit sort of picking his favourites as to who got his discipline. One of the things he was sort of feared for, or often criticised for, was when men were told to come down from the rigging from manning the sail. She's a square rigger, you see, a beautiful little ship actually. This is her natural colour, by the way, no paint job on this. And when the men had to come down from the rigging on the sails, the last man down would be flogged. Now this was not at all usual behaviour, and was seen as a very harsh treatment by many of the crew, and multiplied in the fact that he seemed to pick on certain people. He seemed to have some specials that he liked and some folks he didn't, and it was really this and a couple of other actions that led to his downfall. So there was a junior officer called Dave Casey, who was a popular officer amongst the crew. And one day, as they were sailing around the West Indies, the Captain Piggott noticed that there was a loose rope, and when Casey came down, he was responsible for looking after the crew who had or hadn't in this particular case tied this rope off. Casey was a good chap, and he says, I take full responsibility, sir. They're my crew, they're my men, they should have done a better job. And Piggott demanded a public apology in front of all the ship's company, which he duly gave, Casey gave, and then he asked Casey to go on his knees and make the apology. Well, this is very disrespectful to a Navy officer. Casey was a Navy officer. Casey refused, and Piggott said that once they got back to port, he would have him done for not behaving well, and he would end his naval career and have him delisted as a naval officer. And that's a major thing in these days. These guys were at sea for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and their families really depended on them climbing through the ranks in order to better the family name and the likes. So this caused big ructions amongst the crew, and already murmurs began. Shortly after that, the word was out that he was going to be doing one of his floggings again, and the crew tried to rush down from the sails. Now the guys who were on the outside of the sails, so if you imagine if you imagine the poor fellows who are here and here, well, they've got no chance of getting down quickly. And so a couple of the young uns, they really rushed because they were trying not to be the ones to cop a flogging, and in their haste 3 of them fell, and they fell to the deck and they died. And Piggott showed no remorse. In fact, quite to the contrary, he had their bodies unceremoniously thrown over the side of the ship and referred to them as lubbers, which apparently is a bad thing. I think it's like calling someone a Care Bear today. I think it means they're landsmen rather than seafaring folks. And this really set the crew off. And that night, a few of the crew, 20 odd of the crew, got a bit of rum in them that they'd nicked, and stormed the captain's cabin and stabbed him to death, basically hacked him to death. Killed another 15 of his crew while they were at it. Killed 8 of the officers while they were at it. And then they realised, right, well, what are we going to do now? Because they can hardly sail back and plead with the Admiralty for the captain's behaviour. That wasn't going to work. So instead, they decided they would hand over the ship to the Spanish, which is all a bit naughty. So they took Hermione into port and handed her over to Spanish command. And the Spanish, who were ported at La Guera, renamed her Santa Cecilia, and they put her under the control of Don Ramus Chalas, and he would be her new captain. And like I say, they renamed her Santa Cecilia. They paid the British very poorly, given these ships were worth a lot of money, and they only gave them 25 guineas each, which is not a lot of money for getting a nice functional ship of the line, not ship of the line, but frigate back in those days. So that was a little bit naughty by the Spanish. And 30 odd of the sailors, they didn't know what to do, so they ended up carrying on sailing on the ship, and they would be a member of the cruise company working with the Spanish. So it just goes to show you, I mean, these guys must have been napping themselves. The rest of the crew escaped to land and basically tried to make their way back to various ports or Blighty itself. Now the British found out about this after a schooner was captured, and the message went out that the Spanish had the British ship, the Hermione. The British did actually petition the Spanish to return the ship to their hands. Of course, the Spanish said, "Get nicked, it's our ship now." And sort of wanted posters, and the word went up there'd be a reward for the crew, and in fact 30 odd of the crew were recaptured. 24 of them were hung. The ones that weren't were pardoned by Captain Bligh, who of course became a very famous character. Now the British then said, right, well, we're not going to let these Spanish chaps keep our ship, and they came up with a cunning plan to recover her, and a Lord Hamilton, or Hamilton, Captain Hamilton as he was known at the time, was dispatched in the Surprise, which is of course one of our other naval action ships, and also the ship that's used in Master and Commander, although this was Hamilton and not Russell Crowe who was sailing her. And Hamilton sailed into the Spanish port in the middle of the night. Now this is a port that had 200 port cannon fortifications defending her, and he sailed in the middle of the night. All the sailors were blacked up, and no light clothing, no metal objects showing, so that they wouldn't sparkle to any light, ship lights. They set 3 companies of sailors out in small boats, in launches, and those launches, their task was to sail up to both sides in the rear of the Santa Cecilia and mount a boarding action, and then they used to refer to it as cutting her free. And that's exactly what they did. Now it all went wrong, as great plans do, and they were spotted, and the Spanish Marines opened up on them, but the Spanish Marines also, in a little bit of a nighttime panic, opened up on many of their own sailors who were in launches guarding the various ships, and this sowed great confusion amongst the Spanish during the action. And in the end, the Brits managed to get aboard, and Hamilton himself, so it's good to see the old captains leading from the front. Hamilton himself, he came up on the port side. He was one of the first groups up, and they got themselves into some tough action, and actually Hamilton got smacked over the head with a pistol, stabbed by a sabre, and shot by grape shot. So you can't say he wasn't involved in the thick of it. He was, and the guys he went on were in a lot of bother, but just as things were turning nasty, the Marines came up on the other side of the ship, bayonet charged the Spanish in the rear, which is always a good way to ruin your Friday night, and managed to turn the fight a bit. The Spanish then fled below decks as the Marines were using their superior weaponry to put pay to them. But as they fled below decks, it took away their advantage of numbers. So the Brits now had their fully hardened Marines just basically going through the decks, through the rooms, room to room, getting the opportunity to reload and pick their fight as they wanted. And possibly it's just remarkable this. I actually had to read up about all this because it's such a remarkable story. Surely there's a movie in this, Master and Commander 2 or something. Because after the battle, the Spanish had lost 113 men, 119 men, 231 prisoners were taken, including 11 officers. The British, for all their effort, so they've sailed aboard enemy vessel. They've sailed aboard an enemy vessel at night under fire, scaled the sides of it, swept the decks clear, gone room to room. The British had 11 men injured. Not a single man died. 4 serious injuries, and one of those was Hamilton himself with his sabre wounds and his grape shot wounds and his pistol whipping. So he had a bad day. He had a bit of a bad day. But he went back to Britain, where he was looked after very well and given a whole bunch of rewards. He became a very wealthy man, and was paid a high purse for recapturing the ship, unlike the poor buggers who gave it away and got 25 knicker each. And Hamilton became quite the name in British society, and was, the toast of the town, one might say. So that's a lot of history, man. That's like 15 minutes history. But I think it's an amazing bit of history. It's well worth reading about if you want to go and fertile around. Because it's such an astounding action, there's a fair amount of it available to read as to the retaking of the Santa Cecilia. When they retook her, they renamed her Redoubtable, I think, not Redoubtable. Anyway, eventually she was renamed Retribution. And she stayed in service for another 5 years until returning to Portsmouth, where she was finally broken up in 1805. So, how does she sail? Well, she's quite nimble. I mean, all the fifth rates are. She looks good. She's a good-looking ship. She is a bit like a mini Surprise. Square rigger. Turns quite well. She's got quite a lot of cannons, 21 cannons on each side. Chasers both the front and the back of the boat. She's got that lovely sort of deep red. I do like this sort of deep red, sort of brick red colour to her, the little stripe across the top. Yeah, she's quite a pretty ship. But where does she fit in? Now, we have to be a little bit wary here because the devs put her in the game and then, of course, they took her back out. Now, we don't know why they did that because it's secret dev business. But what so the stats that we see now, I don't know if those stats will persist. Oh, there's a bit of some boobies. There's boobies. Hurrah! So that's Princess Jasmine from Aladdin there with the boobies out, and rather a bit of bondage with the ropes as well. So that's even better. Didn't know that. Maybe that's Hermione on the front. I'll have to find out who Hermione is. She'll be some sort of Greek god of can't afford a shirt or something. Greek goddess of not enough clothing. She fights okay. She's reasonably steady gunboat. She does list a little bit, so I'm not at best point of sail. Let me just put her at best point of sail. And so she does tilt a little bit, but you can always sort that out with ballast or drop into battle sails or making your sails flush to the wind. So 4%, 3%, that's a reasonable lean with the wind coming across. And by all accounts, she wobbles a bit as well. So, but how does she compare to the other ships? So there's a lot of fifth rates. It's a crowded division. So pardon my rather crass description here. This is her stats. So she's got 228 pounds if you're running cannons, or 504 pounds if you're running carronades. Now, compared to the other ships, she's kind of better than the Serb, the Renommée, and the Surprise. She's almost as good as the frigate, but she sort of gets biffed up a bit by the Belpool, the pirate frigate, and then the Essex and the Trink are really all over her. So you'll see here, this is the battle rating. She's a battle rating 180. She'll crew 350. Now I was running hammocks in that, and this one's got crew space, so that's why you saw more. So if you're running around at Master Commander with 250 crew, if you put hammocks on her, you'll be apples. And just make sure you turn off the non-shooting side. She outguns the Surd, the Renommée and the Surprise reasonably significantly, but she's also much slower than all three of them. Now these ships get their bonus really as chase ships, the Renommée and the Surprise, but she's much slower than all of them. She has a lot more crew, so she could cap them easy enough. She's competitive with the Belpool and the frigate, but she has a lot less structure. Similar armour, but a lot less structure. And then, to be honest, she's just going to get trounced due to the DPS difference here. So, sorry, that's not DPS, it's just the alpha cannons here. But these guys, although they tend to have less guns, apart from the Trink, they're all higher caliber guns than the Santa Cecilia sails around with. So she certainly is a good fun ship. If you manage to get your hands on one and you don't mind trolling around with the smaller ships, she turns quite well. So she's got a 3.72 turn rate. Well, that's almost the same as the Essex. So that does make her pretty handy, pretty nimble at sitting behind the bigger ships. So I suppose she's a good support ship. I don't really think she stands out like the Essex and the Trink. They're kind of really good. The Belpool is for its size, is a really sturdy ship. The Surprise, the Surprise and the Renommée, you can sort of pimp them out so they're super fast. But this baby, the Santa Cecilia, she runs around. Basically, her gun deck is the 13 cannons. They're 12 pounders, and the top deck's 9 pounders. Now you can only put 24-pound carronades on. Some of the other fifth rates you can pimp out with better carronades. So that's the Santa Cecilia, or Hermione, or Retribution. I like her to sail around in. I think she looks great. I mean, she does look like, my first proper ship. I like the colour scheme on her, but as far as if you're looking for that sort of top of your division, or a ship that's going to have a particular purpose as a chase ship, or a sniping ship, or a face-to-face brawler, I'm afraid at the moment with her current stats, this isn't her. I also, just a quick tip of the hat and big thank you to Admiral Bobby Sands. He lent me this and asked me to bring it back with most of its Duras. I did get tagged by some pesky pirates as I was coming in, but managed to get away thanks to a Trink who was in with me. So as long as I bring it home, Bobby, she'll still have all the Duras you gave her to me with. So that's it, the Santa Cecilia or the Hermione. It's interesting that they've actually left her in here as the Santa Cecilia, given she didn't sail a great deal before she was recaptured. Maybe they feel as though there's already enough British ships in the game. So as this little beauty sails off into the sunset, that will do for me, and thanks for watching. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. I will see you on the oceans, and I will catch you.